Welcome to another installment of Hilchos Basar B'Chalav. We are currently in Siman Tzadi, chapter 90. We are discussing the rules of the Kechal. We are talking about the kashrus of the cow udder. We are in Seifim Gimel and Daled. We are pushing our way through. So we talked about in our last several classes about what the din of the Gemara was regarding the consumption of the udder. And again, the udder is a little bit difficult because when the cow is slaughtered, the milk becomes chalav shchuta, but the rabbis do not allow that milk to remain inside of it. When you cook the meat of the udder, you had to remove it. So it's created some disputes over the centuries as to what the Gemara meant by this, and we learned about what the essential din of the Gemara was that many people learn. We talked about the custom that developed as a result of some of the minority explanations. And now we're going to kind of wrap it up in talking about what we can do with the udder, how we can serve it, how we can salt it. So let's go through the halacha real quick, and then we'll jump into learning about cutting the kachal, cutting the udder with a knife, and also about salting it. So let's see what we can talk about today. So the Shulchan Aruch says, "Mutar lachatoch kachal roseach b'sakin shechat chubo basar." You may take a meat knife and cut a hot udder with it. Okay, and the Rama adds, "V'chol shekain kachal chai afal pi shehu malaya chalav." You can also cut the raw udder even though it's still full of milk. Okay, which is what we just mentioned. V'chein mutar lachatoch basar b'sakin shechatchu bo kachal. One may then go ahead and take the knife from which one went and cut the udder and cut other milk with it. V'chein hadin lachol zeh b'kli she'achlu bo zeh. It is also permitted to go ahead and eat this in the utensil with which one ate that. Okay, so we have our disagreements about its preparation, but it's essentially kosher, and they are essentially able to both be eaten in the same fashion. The Rama adds, "V'hu adin l'litzlos zeh b'shapud shalo she'et shasalu bo zeh, v'hu adin the mutar lahanicho b'ka'ara im basar tzali afilu shneim chamim dela'acher tzliya hakachal dino kishar basar l'chol davar." And the Rama adds that you can also use the same skewer to roast your meat as you did roast this one. And so too it's permitted to put them in the same plate. Meaning you can take the udder and put it with roasted meat, even when both of them are hot. Because once you've done the roasting, the udder is now considered like all other types of meat for all our considerations. The Rama continues, "V'davcha shenitzla kedino." That's assuming you did it according to the way that we just told you how to do it. Tahainu shekaruhu techila shesi v'arav v'tachuhu b'kosel, which means you sliced it lengthwise and widthwise and smashed it against the wall. Aval im avar v'tzalo below kriya o kriya muetes kol devarim elu lechachila asurim. But if you went ahead and violated the custom and you roasted it without any slicing, or you ripped it open a little bit, okay, unlike all the things that you were expected to do, technically it would be prohibited to put it together with other meat. But even if you mess that up, the meat and the udder are going to be fine. The Rama continues, "V'im karuhu kedino v'tzalo, afal pi shematza acher kach gumos maleos chalav ein lachush." So, if you went ahead and cut it open like we explained you to do, and you went ahead and roasted it, even though after the fact you went ahead and found these little holes full of milk, don't worry about that milk. V'chein im henicho kach shalem kodem sliaso im chelvo yom shalem mutter. And so too, if you just left the udder sitting there with all the milk inside of it for a whole day, it's also going to be permitted. But lo amrinan kavush kimavushul bekit hai gavna. And we don't say that letting it soak is like letting it cook for the purposes of this udder. Okay, that's the end of Gimel. Dalet. The Mechaber says, Litzlos kechal o lemolchol im habasar dino kedin slias o melichas kavedim basar. So the rule of roasting the udder, okay, or to salt it with other meat, is the same rule of roasting or salting a liver with other meat. And some people allow you to salt the udder on top of other meat. The Ramah says, and one should not be salting the udder with other meat. But if you did, fine. It's fine. New halacha the Ramah adds over here. Or hakeva. Remember the keva? Remember the stomach, right? And the skin on the outside of it? We talked about that a little bit ago. La'achashar husar mimenu chelbo mitocho v'hudach yesh lo din shar basar u'mutar l'machol im shar basar v'ein lo din kechal klal. So the stomach that we talked about, which we talked about previously, right, a couple simonim ago. So we were saying over here, by the way, if you take the skin off of it and you go ahead and salt it, it's permitted to go ahead and salt it. Once you take the milk out of it and rinse it out, you could go ahead and salt it with other meat. Okay, and it doesn't have the same rules applied to it as the udder does. Okay, and so that's what he says. Now, let's look at the source of this. Is it permitted to go ahead and cut the kachal with a knife when it's hot, and then you want to go ahead and use a knife for something else? Okay, so let's talk about what the issue is and why we're talking about the kachal being a problem with the hot knife, and not it didn't seem like this would be a problem at all. Why are we making this a problem? So the reason why is the following. When you look at the Gemara says, the Gemara in Chulin, Kuf Yiralv, 111. Itmar, Kavda Ilui Bisra Shari, Damim Mishrak Sharik, Kichla Ilui Bisra Aser, My Taima, Chalav Saruchi Misrach. So there's a comparison between the liver and the udder in the Gemara. If one goes ahead and roasts liver on top of other meat, so you have it on an open flame, and none of them have been salted or anything like that yet, and you went ahead and roast them all together, then all the meat underneath the liver is permitted. Why? Because as the blood comes out of the liver, it's going to slide off of the meat. However, if you took an udder and did it on top, we say that's a problem. Okay? And we had mentioned this type of Gemara earlier, and we're going to go over this problem here in the Gemara right now, because the milk will stick to it. Rav Dimi min Harada masni ifcha. Rav Dimi from Neharda learned it differently. Kichla ilui bat bisra share. If you put the udder on top, it's mutter. Why? Chalav shchuta d'Rabbanan. The milk is only a rabbinic prohibition. Kav de ilui basra aser. Right? If you put the liver on top, you're going to ruin the meat. Dam d'Oraisa. Blood is a Torah prohibition. Darish Marimar. Marimar gave the following presentation at the yeshiva. Hilchasa, Vein Kavda, Vein Kichla, Tuti Bisra Shari, Ili Bisra, Diavad in, Lachachil Eloi. He said, whether you're talking about a liver or whether you're talking about an udder, one puts it underneath the other meat, everything's fine. You put it on top of the meat. If it was an oopsie, that's going to be permitted, but one's not allowed to put it there, in the first place. So Rashi says that according to our understanding of the Gemara, we aren't allowed to put these on top of the other one because our skewers are not suspended. They are lying on their side. They don't look like a shawarma skewer. They look like a kebab skewer. You lay it down, okay? And here I am talking about the right. So like they lay it down, and so sometimes you lift one side of the thing and you find that what's on the bottom is now on the top, and sometimes you take the other part and you tilt it the other direction and you find that's what was on the bottom is now on the top. So therefore, no matter what side you put the liver on, whether it's at the top of it or at the bottom of it, it's going to prohibit the whole thing. So that's what Rashi points out on this Gemara over here at the end. Tosfos says that we should learn from this case an interesting type of permission. Okay? So when you go ahead and cut the kachal open, so you cut it, and you cut it lengthwise and widthwise, and you smash it against the wall, that you should technically be able to go ahead and cook it in a pot, according to Rabbeinu Tam. We saw earlier that Rabbeinu Tam has this leniency, and b'diavad we rely on Rabbeinu Tam as one of the reasons to permit it. We don't find in Rashi a single case that he disagrees with this. Okay? Again, because Tosfos learns Rashi differently than we saw from the Sefer Mitzvos Katan. We said that our stringency in the minhag is from a different source. But let's run with Tosfos here for a second. Okay? So we see over here that that the kachal and whatever stuff is in it, if long as it's sliced open, then whatever fattiness that comes from it is not going to be a problem. Okay. So what we say that we are now concerned not to cut the kachal while it's still hot with a hot knife. Minhag shel hevelhu. This is a stupid custom. This is a useless custom. Okay. Why? Because we see even if they're all stuck together in one skewer, it's fine. And when we say what we can go ahead and use it for, especially when the kachal is on the bottom, we say that's fine as well. So, and it's only prohibited when you flip it and the kachal is sitting on top of the other meat. That would be a problem. So therefore, you should permit a knife. We kind of see where Tosfos is going with this, and we see how this fits into the halacha nicely. So the Rush brings down Tosfos. Okay, so he says that when you cut it all open correctly, then using a knife would be okay. And he says that even on one skewer, it would be permitted l'chachila as long as it was held upright as well. Okay, and he also said that the smock himself agrees with this. So if the smock agrees with it, then the minhag should be allowed us to be lenient. So therefore, the Torah writes it's permitted l'chachila to go ahead and cut the knife. To take the knife to cut the kachal that was already used to cut other meat, and to go ahead and exchange it from one to the other. Okay? So that's what the Gemara learns. Okay, now, is our Gemara teaching us a permission that the kachal was sliced according to the din, where you slice it lengthwise and widthwise and smash it against the wall? Or is it giving us permission to go ahead and use the skewer, even when the kachal wasn't sliced open properly, and it's being lenient even in a situation where you're just relying on the leniency of it not absorbing, but only absorbing a prohibition? So Tosfos asked this question, okay, and he says he says basically that here it's a little bit worse, that because even though when you're cutting it open, there's still some of the milk dripping on it, and so that's our concern. Okay, so what we're saying is that even though you attempted to take some of the milk out, it was still might be a problem of some. The reason why there were some people who were strict is because that you might still see milk dripping out of it. Okay, so that's why you can't put it on top on a skewer that's standing upright. Okay, and so that would allow us to learn that way. But when you're roasting the kachal on the top, so you're going to see some of the milk dripping out potentially, and that's what the Gemara's concern was. So once you slice it open and smash it against the wall, so then that little bit of milk won't be a problem. So Tosfos seems to be understanding that that's the case, and that's why you can go ahead and use it in that case. So, but if you didn't do that, then technically there's still a rabbinic prohibition on it, and you shouldn't be allowed to go ahead and use it. And so therefore, without doing that, the Gemara is not giving you permission to do it. On this Gemara, the Marshal makes the following comment, and he says that one should not cut the kachal while it's still on the fire until it's fully roasted, okay, if it wasn't sliced open properly with cutting it lengthwise and widthwise and smashed against the wall. However, once it's fully roasted, then one could go ahead and slice it even though it hasn't been sliced at all, okay, which is similar to how we were learning the sugya according to Rabbeinu Tam. The Rashba disagrees on this, and he says the following. He says that the question is about what is according to the permissive opinion at the beginning of the Mara, what's the permission for it? And then for the later part of it, why is it saying that that should be a problem? Because even if we went ahead and cooked the kachal by itself with the milk still in it, you would need shishim against it. Is the way the Rashba understood the sugya. And so, if you have any milk left in it, it's going to stick on it and stick to the other meat. And so that's what the first half of the Gemara is telling us is a problem, and that's why a liver was different than an udder. And so, therefore, when we were learning that after the fact it's permitted, it's only permitted because of the fact that the milk is not really a full-fledged prohibition. And so, therefore, there's reason to be lenient on it if you went ahead and roasted them together, but it doesn't give you permission to go ahead and use it. And so, when we get to the end of the Gemara, what we're saying is that you weren't giving full permission to go ahead and do this. So by the time we get to the final halacha standing of the Gemara, the kachal had to be sliced open properly with slicing lengthwise and widthwise and smashed against the wall. Otherwise, why wouldn't I just permit you to just go ahead and roast like this, however you wanted to? And it's only like, maybe you shouldn't do this. But it sounds to me, from this case, that really you should do that. So if you didn't slice it open at all, the Rashba argues that it shouldn't be permitted. Okay? And so that's his argument. Okay? And so he says that maybe I'm not learning it right, and maybe the little bit of milk that's in there isn't a problem, and maybe it also gets burned up in the fire, and there's just a little bit of milk, and so that's why they weren't so strict for it by roasting. But by cooking, they were more strict, and so therefore that's why the slicing and dicing and smashing is more required. Okay? So the Rashba is saying that the problem is that there actually is milk inside of it. It's a little different than Tosfos. Okay? So, let's see. In the Divrei Chamudos on the Rush, he points out the following. He says that the Rabbeinu Yerucham says that one could go ahead and slice the kachal open with a meat knife, and even if it's raw, okay, and if you can do any slicing and squeezing out milk at all. And also that rule would apply when you've already roasted it and also did no slicing either. And the Knesset Saganola, if we hear on the tour, he makes the same point that the Sefer Truma and the Sharei Dura, all these people who are very strict about doing all the slicing, dying, and smashing against the wall, they are more strict when it hasn't been sliced at all, like the Rashba is saying. Okay? So, however, the Knesset Gedolah says that that Tosfos is more correct, that really it should make a difference. The Beis Yosef here on the tour writes the following. He quotes the Ran that by Udders, when the kachal is on the bottom of a stack, okay, and the milk might be coming out, because in this case the flavor of the meat itself that's coming out of it, that's what's coming out of the udder, and so we're not worried about that because it's not as fatty as, like, let's say regular meat when you're roasting it and dripping in other places. And the truth is that all the milk is going to eventually drip out too. So all that flavor that's in the kachal, whether it's the milky flavor or not the milky flavor, it's just going to drip out and going to go past the other meat anyway. However, that doesn't mean that it gives you permission to go ahead and roast it like that without doing the slicing and dicing and squeezing against the wall, because some people aren't okay with that, the Ran says. Okay? So, therefore, it sounds like from the Gemara that it would be okay to go ahead and roast all of them together on one skewer when it's standing upright. And that doesn't seem to matter. That's the way the Ran seems to learn the Shugya. So, what the Ron is basically saying, that even without slicing it open, it sounds like that could also suffice. Okay. However, that problem still gives us the problem with the Rashba. So the Beis Yosef points out that the Rashba on the Gemara himself takes a more lenient approach than he does in his halachic work, and so therefore the Tur doesn't quote any of it. Okay, it doesn't quote any of this approach. So that's why the Rashba is not brought down as someone who disputes this in the Beis Yosef, because even if he didn't slice it open, even though it doesn't sound like from the Rashba that should be okay, he's saying that since you're over the fire and a lot of the stuff floats out, it's not that big a deal. But that doesn't mean you really should do it that way. You really should do the slicing open, and that puts everybody in one opinion: Tosfos, Rashba, and all the other opinions. Okay. What does the Rambam say? The Rambam says one should not roast the gachal that is sliced on top of other meat on one skewer, and if you do it, it's okay. Okay, and the Kesef Mishnah says that that's what the Rashba is saying in the Chedushim as well, and everyone else seems to say that that's the case as well. However, the Lechem Mishnah has an interesting take on the Rambam, just to point it out. He says that the udder has to be sliced. So maybe he means that just like Tosfos says that, you have to actually slice it all the way open, and that's what we meant. And then it has to be put on top, but you really shouldn't put it there. Okay, so that's his approach. But the Kesef Mishnah says that's not what he's saying. So just notice that not everybody accepted that. It's interesting sometimes in halacha to kind of see, like, it sounds like a silly thing, but sometimes everyone's going to read the language ever so slightly differently. So it's not mukhrach. It's not forcing you to read it one way or another. Now, what does the Ramah say? So the Ramah weighs in, and he says in the Darchei Moshe, he quotes the Rabbeinu Yerucham that I mentioned earlier from the Divrei Chamudos on the Rosh, that one may go ahead and cut the kachal with a meat knife, even while it's still raw, even if it never was sliced. Okay, so Tosfos and the Rosh and the Rashba, all these guys, they're all saying that you went ahead and cut out, you took out all the milk. Okay, it was what you're supposed to do, and therefore you could go ahead and use a knife to go ahead and cut it. That's going to be used between it and a regular knife. Okay. The Rashba and Rabbi Yerucham add something a little bit different. You really need to take some of the milk out. So when you go ahead and cut it, it's perfectly fine. And even if you didn't cut it at all, because that's okay. Now the Ron says that having it all on one skewer, the Rashba, he agrees with the Rashba on that, but you really should slice it open. So he's really kind of giving a little bit of a hat tip to Tosfos. So at the end of the day, what it comes down to is that pretty much everybody is fairly similar. It's just that there's a little bit of a disagreement about how much slicing is required. Does the Rambam hold like Tosfos that really should slice it open, or is it a little bit of slicing and then after roasting you can go ahead and use it? But it's not as bad as we would make it out to be. So even though there's the machlokes rishon. Okay, so now can you go ahead and so now can you go ahead and eat it with other meat if you went? Oh, can you go ahead and cook it after you've gone ahead and roasted it like that? So that's a question. So the question is, so let's say you roasted it and you fulfilled the requirements for roasting, which is like you didn't slice it, right? And you went ahead and roasted it. You're supposed to have sliced it. What if you didn't do that? Okay. And then went ahead and use it. So the Bach asked this question, and and he quotes the Haggadah Sha'arei Dura, which is the Maharai, right, or Israelin, and he says that if you went ahead and roasted it, you wouldn't actually be allowed to cook it afterwards, because it's not like liver. So it's like liver and not like liver, okay? Because the liver is a blood issue. So blood, with roasting it, the idea is that the roasting eliminates all of the blood. But by the udders, there's no reason to assume that all the milk comes out. We don't have such a Masorah. We have such a tradition that that's how it works in the Gemara. So therefore, one shouldn't cook it after roasting it. And the Marshal says that as well, that really you shouldn't do that. But if you did cook it after roasting it, it would be fine. Okay? And the Taz echoes this. This is the Taz in number 10. Okay? And that's what he says. So, and this is also echoed in the Shach as well, in Sifkat in number 24. Okay? So the Torah's Chatas of the Ramah, he says actually is perfectly permitted. He happens to note that. So the Pesach Tshuva quotes the Prima Gadim over here, and he says that if you went ahead and roasted it without slicing it, if that's the permission, b'diavad, okay, and if you went ahead and cooked it afterwards, and so he says in that case one would not allow to be lenient because the rules of the udder should apply even after roasting, okay, and because it's not like based on like actual observable phenomena that they made these rules. It's just based on how they set up the gezerah. So the Deah Shulchan has some comments on this Prima Gadim. And he says that the Prima Gadim is talking about that it was cooked with meat afterwards. So he doesn't learn the Prima Gadim just that it was cooked on its own, but you took the kachal, you roasted it, and then put it in a pot to cook with other meat. But if you cook it by itself in a pot, why not be lenient? Okay? So even though you didn't do all the cutting, okay? So he seems you should be permitted. However, the body of Shulchan, as is his usual course of action, said you should be stringent. So you can see over here for the Deah Shulchan, you could be lenient. Okay, the what's it called? The Pre-Toar and the Zivchei Tzedek and the Knesset Gedola, that if you went ahead and did all the slicing correctly, that not only could you use a meat knife, but you could even use a dirty meat knife. Okay, so that would also be fine. However, the Minchas Yaakov says you should have a clean knife to do that. So what do the Mechaber and the Ramah say? So the Mechaber, as we said earlier, one allows you to go ahead and cut with the knife, and the Ramah says that even if it's raw, and the Mechaber says that you can cut it with a knife that was used for cutting meat earlier, and you can do it all the way around. And then the Ramah says you can go ahead and roast it even on the same skewer, even if you're gonna wobble the skewer from side to side. Okay, and you can also serve it on the same tray as other roasted meat. Okay, even when they're all hot, because after it's roasted, everything is happy. Okay. And you have to do it where you sliced it open, lengthwise and widthwise, and smashed it against the wall. Okay, but if you didn't, then we get into the oopsie category. Don't do the oopsies. Okay, so that's how they paskin. So they basically take the approach of the Rashba that you really should go ahead and go ahead and slice it even when it's hot, even if it wasn't sliced correctly, because we're saying a b'diavad, it should be that way. Okay, so the Gra points out that even though the Mechaber doesn't mention it, that's what he means, and the Ramah is even a little more lenient to paskin like Tosfos, that the kachal is to be sliced open properly. Then you can go ahead and serve it with other meat, and even with another knife. Okay, but without slicing it open, you really shouldn't. But b'diavad would be okay, because even Tosfos, we said like Tosfos and Rashba, there's not a big difference between them. Okay. So that's basically what it comes down to. Okay, so the question is, so what's the proper way to kind of understand this? So there's a lot of Mefarshim write the following. So the Aruch Shulchan and Chachmas Adam, they use the language of the Ramah that after you went ahead and roasted it properly, it's considered like all the other meat, and you can do it. So as long as you do, that's okay. However, the Minchas Yaakov, we said, is not going to allow you to cook it with other meat. So that's a chumrah that's also echoed by the Marshal and the Bach and the Taz, that if you didn't do proper slicing, you should go ahead and cook with other meat. Okay. However, other people disagree and say that's fine for them, but the Ramah actually is being lenient in such a case. The Darchei Tshuva says that he quotes another Achron. He says that if you went ahead and he quotes another Achron who says that it's not allowed to fry udder after roasting it. Okay, and even if there's no other meat in there and there's no other milk in there. So if you didn't do it properly, so he says that frying is also a problem. Okay, so no udder schnitzel. Okay, that's the other thing there. And let's see what else over here. So the one last thing in the Ramah over here that's important to point out is that the Ramah follows his opinion from the Sefer, the Isser V'Heter Ha'aruch, and he also has his own opinion, Toras Chatas, that after you've done all the proper roasting and salting, the milk that's in there is not considered a concern anymore. And so the Taz says that's okay, and the Primum echoes it and basically says that that's because it's not really milk anyway. So the question is, can you eat that milk or drink that milk? So there's a Kaf HaChaim over here. He mentions that it's okay, but the Ben Ish Chai says it's a Maras Ayin problem. Okay, so that's basically what it comes down to. Let's just go over quickly all these rules again. So the Gemara brings down that one may go ahead and cut hot udder with a knife that was used to cut other meat. Okay, and we talked about even having the meat cooked together, roast together. So we saw that Tosos and the Rosh, they say that the sugya is talking about you had to take out all the milk from it, because the first half of the first couple of people were like, the milk is going to stick to it, it's going to get burnt up, and then we're like, it's mater b'diavad, mater l'chachila. So they hold that really you should get rid of the milk first. That's what they say. Okay? And so that would also allow you to treat kachal as meat after that fact, and you had to do the slicing and ricing correctly. So the Rashba and the Rini Rucham brought down the Vechamudos, they imply that even if you hadn't gotten rid of the milk completely, like you should be trying to do that, but even if it's still there, it's still okay. And again, we didn't find a big distinction between the two, as the Ron points out, that when it comes to roasting it, okay, if you had the kachal underneath the other meat, that would actually technically be okay. And that was even if you forgot to slice it open. It's only if you had it on top and you forgot to, that you would have the dripping milk problem. So, which means that as long as it's been roasted, you could go ahead and cut it with a meat knife, okay? And or it's permitted because you've also sliced it open and smashed it against the wall, okay? And so in that situation, the opinions come kind of equivalent. And the Kesef Mishnah says that the Rambam kind of agrees with Tosos in this situation. Okay, the Bach adds a little chumrah over here. It's important to note that once you've gone ahead and roasted it, you shouldn't go ahead and cook it. And you shouldn't treat it like the permission to cook it like you do with liver. And if the milk didn't come out completely, you shouldn't cook it after roasting. Okay? And we see that the Marshal says that as well. But if you did go ahead and cook it by itself, it would be permitted. Okay? We saw, however, that the Ramah was lenient as well in this case. So we also said the question was, can you have a dirty knife? So we brought a couple of people who says that we're not so sure about it. But, what we can assume is that if you went ahead and did everything correctly, then a clean knife, not clean knife, you can be lenient in that case. Okay? So we mentioned briefly about not completely cleaning out the kachal. We'll pick up with that next time when we discuss those rules. We will pick that up in our next class. Thank you very much for joining us today, and we will look forward to learning with you next time.